I never thought I'd be writing this from a hotel room in Vancouver at 63 years old, but here I am, trying to make sense of how my entire world collapsed and rebuilt itself in the span of 3 weeks. My name is Richard, and this is the story of how my daughter saved my life by pretending to be someone she wasn't. The rain was hammering against the windows of our Kitsilano home that December afternoon when everything changed. It was the kind of rain that makes Vancouver famous, the type that seeps into your bones and makes you want to stay inside with a cup of coffee and good company. I was doing exactly that, sitting in my study, going through some client files. I'm a forensic accountant, have been for 35 years. My job is finding money people don't want found, tracking financial trails that criminals think they've erased. Ironic, considering what I was about to discover in my own home. My daughter Claire was supposed to be in her room doing homework. She was 10 years old, a bright kid who'd been through more than any child should have to endure. 3 years ago, when she was 7, she was in a car accident. My first wife, Sarah, was driving. Sarah died on impact. Claire survived, but the trauma left her deaf. Or so, every doctor, every specialist, every audiologist in British Columbia had confirmed. She wore hearing aids, attended a special program at her school, learned sign language. We'd adapted our entire lives around her disability. But that afternoon, as I sat reviewing a particularly complex insurance fraud case, I heard something that made my blood run cold. I heard footsteps. Quick, purposeful footsteps. Then I heard my daughter's voice, clear as a bell, saying my name. Dad. I spun around in my chair so fast I nearly knocked over my coffee. Claire was standing in the doorway of my study. She wasn't wearing her hearing aids. Her hands weren't moving in sign language. She was just standing there, looking at me with an expression I'd never seen before. It was fear mixed with determination, the look of someone who'd been carrying a terrible secret for far too long. Claire, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Did you just— I can hear you, Dad, she said, and I watched her lips move, heard the words coming from her mouth. I've always been able to hear you. I'm so sorry, I lied, but I had to. Evelyn and Dr. Morrison are planning to kill you, and I didn't know how else to protect you. For a moment, I couldn't process what she was saying. My daughter, who I'd watched struggle with deafness for 3 years, who I'd taken to countless appointments, who I'd learned sign language for, could hear, and my wife, Evelyn, the woman I'd married 2 years ago, the nurse who'd helped us through Sarah's death and Claire's recovery, was planning to kill me? Claire, sweetheart, what are you talking about? I managed to say, though my hands were shaking. She walked into the room and closed the door behind her. Even that simple action was different now. Before, she would have left doors open because she couldn't hear if someone was coming. Now she moved like someone who was acutely aware of every sound in the house. Evelyn left 20 minutes ago, Claire said, speaking quietly but urgently. She said she was going to her book club, but I heard her on the phone first. She was talking to Dr. Morrison. They think I can't hear them because they know I'm deaf. She made air quotes around the word, and I could see tears starting to form in her eyes. Dad, they've been planning this for months, maybe longer. Dr. Morrison isn't really her uncle. They're partners. They've done this before. Done what before? I asked, though part of me already knew. Part of me, the forensic accountant part that spent years tracking financial criminals, was already putting pieces together I hadn't wanted to see. They marry men, Claire said, and now she was crying, but she kept talking. Wealthy men, usually widowers with children. Evelyn becomes the perfect wife, the caring stepmother, doctor. Morrison acts as a family friend, a trusted advisor. Then they start billing insurance companies for fake medical treatments. Millions of dollars. And when they've taken everything they can, when the insurance companies start getting suspicious, the husband has an accident, a heart attack, a fall, something that looks natural. I felt like I was falling, like the ground had opened up beneath my chair and I was tumbling into darkness. Claire, how do you know this? Because I've been listening, she said simply. For 3 years, Dad, I've been listening to everything. Do you remember the accident? The one where Mom died and I supposedly lost my hearing? I nodded. Of course I remembered. It was burned into my memory. Sarah had been driving Claire to a piano lesson. A truck ran a red light. Sarah died before the ambulance arrived. Claire was in a coma for 3 days. When she woke up, the doctor said the trauma had damaged her auditory nerves. Profound hearing loss, they called it. I never lost my hearing, Claire said. I could hear the doctors. I could hear you crying next to my bed. I could hear everything. But something happened in that hospital room, Dad. Something that scared me so much I decided to pretend I couldn't hear. What happened? There was a nurse, Claire said. She came in late at night when you'd gone home to shower and change. I was awake but had my eyes closed. She was on the phone with someone. She was talking about Mom's accident, but she was talking about it like she knew it was going to happen. She said something like, "The timing worked perfectly. One down. Now we wait for the widower to be vulnerable." Dad, I was 7 years old, but I understood enough to be terrified. I understood that someone had killed my mom on purpose, and they were planning something else. My head was spinning. Are you saying Evelyn was involved in Sarah's death? I don't know, Claire admitted. But I know that nurse came back 2 months later, as Evelyn, your new neighbor who just happened to be a grief counselor, who just happened to be exactly what we needed. Don't you think that's strange, Dad? I thought back to how I'd met Evelyn. She'd moved in next door 6 months after Sarah died. She'd been so kind, so understanding. She'd helped with Claire, learned sign language faster than I had, always knew the right thing to say. Within a year, we were dating. Within 18 months, we were married. Everyone said how lucky I was to find love again, how perfect she was for our family. Where's your evidence? I asked, and I hated myself for sounding like an accountant instead of a father who should have just believed his daughter. But Claire didn't look hurt. She looked relieved that I was taking her seriously. Evelyn's home office, she said, the one she keeps locked, the safe behind the painting of the Vancouver skyline. The combination is 081517. How do you know the combination? Because I can read lips, Dad, Claire said. That's one of the first things I learned to do when I decided to pretend I was deaf. I had to make it convincing. I watched videos. I practiced. I went to speech therapy and audiologist appointments and pretended I couldn't hear the tests. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but I did it because I was scared. And then, after a while, I realized I could use it. I could listen to things people said around me because they thought I couldn't hear. I could watch their lips when they thought I wasn't looking. I became invisible. For 3 years? I said, incredulous. Claire, you were 7 years old. How did you maintain this for 3 years? Because I was scared, she said simply. Because I didn't know who to trust. Because I kept thinking maybe I was wrong, maybe I'd misunderstood. But then Evelyn married you, and Dr. Morrison started coming around more, and I kept hearing things. Little things at first. Comments about insurance policies, discussions about timelines, references to previous projects, and I started watching them, Dad, really watching. And I saw how she looks at you when she thinks no one's paying attention. There's no love there. There's just calculation. I stood up from my chair, my legs unsteady. Show me, I said. Show me this safe. Claire grabbed my arm. Not now. Evelyn will be back in 2 hours. We can't risk her knowing we've been in there. But Dad, there's more. I've been keeping notes. On my tablet, in files that look like homework assignments. Every conversation I've overheard, every phone call, every suspicious thing. I've been documenting everything. She pulled out her tablet and handed it to me. I opened what looked like a math homework file, but inside was a detailed log. Dates, times, conversations. 3 years' worth of surveillance from a child who'd had the presence of mind to gather evidence while living with potential murderers. I scrolled through the entries, my hands shaking. There were dozens of references to insurance billing, medical claims, timing, previous cases. There were notes about phone calls Claire had overheard between Evelyn and Dr. Morrison, conversations about men with names I didn't recognize. Gerald, Thomas, Martin, Warren, all described the same way. Completed project, successful extraction, no complications. Claire, I said, my voice breaking, why didn't you tell me this sooner? Because I wasn't sure you'd believe me, she said, and she was crying now. I'm 10 years old, Dad. I'm a kid who's been pretending to be deaf for 3 years. Who would believe me over your wife? And I was scared that if I told you and you confronted her, they'd accelerate their plans. They'd hurt you before we could stop them. So I waited. I gathered evidence. I tried to protect you the only way I knew how. I pulled my daughter into my arms and held her while she cried. This brave, brilliant, terrified child who'd been living a lie for years to protect me. My mind was racing, the forensic accountant in me already formulating a plan. "Okay," I said. "Okay, we're going to handle this. But we have to be smart. If what you're saying is true, if they've done this before, they're experienced. They're careful. We need to be more careful." "What are we going to do?" Claire asked. "First," I said, "you're going to keep pretending you're deaf. No one can know about this conversation. Can you do that?" She nodded. "I've been doing it for 3 years." "Second," I continued, "I'm going to use my professional resources. I have contacts at the RCMP, at Insurance Corporation of British Columbia, at the Federal Financial Crimes Division. I'm going to make some very discreet inquiries. And third, tonight, when Evelyn is asleep, I'm going to look in that safe." "Be careful," Claire said. "She's smart, Dad. She does security sweeps of the house. She checks for recording devices. I've watched her do it." "I know how to be careful," I assured her. "This is what I do for a living, sweetheart. I find hidden financial crimes. If there's evidence in that safe, I'll document it properly." That evening was one of the longest of my life. Evelyn came home right on schedule, full of stories about her book club meeting. She was perfect as always, asking about my day, helping Claire with her homework, using sign language, cooking dinner. I watched her carefully for the first time in years, really watched her, and I saw what Claire had been seeing. The way she looked at me when she thought I wasn't watching. Cold, calculating, assessing. Over dinner, she mentioned that Dr. Morrison wanted to have us over for dinner next week. "He's been such a good friend to us," she said. "Especially to you, Richard. He really cares about your health." "My health?" I said carefully. "Well, you've been working so hard," Evelyn said, reaching across the table to touch my hand. "He mentioned he's noticed you seem stressed. He wants to make sure your blood pressure is okay. Maybe run some routine tests. You're not getting any younger, darling." I was 63. I ran 5 kilometers 3 times a week. My last physical had been perfect, but I smiled and nodded. That's thoughtful of him. After dinner, I tucked Claire into bed, and we signed goodnight to each other like we always did. But before I turned off her light, she caught my hand and pressed a piece of paper into it. I palmed it and didn't look at it until I was back downstairs. It was a drawing she'd made, a simple sketch of the painting in Evelyn's office with an arrow pointing to where the safe was hidden. At midnight, I made my move. I'd told Evelyn I had an early morning client meeting and needed to review some files. She'd gone to bed at 11. I waited an hour to make sure she was asleep, then I went to her home office. The painting came off the wall easily, revealing a digital safe. I entered the combination Claire had given me, 081517, the 15th of August, 2017. The date of my first wife's death. The safe clicked open. Inside were folders. 6 of them, each labeled with a man's name: Gerald Thornton, Thomas Westbrook, Martin Street Pierre, Warren Chapman, and at the bottom, 2 more recent folders: Richard Abbott, that was me, and one labeled Contingency, Claire Abbott. My hands were shaking as I opened the folder with my name on it. Inside was everything: life insurance policies I didn't remember signing, medical records from Dr. Morrison showing conditions I didn't have, draft insurance claims for treatments I'd never received, financial projections showing how much my estate was worth, a timeline with dates and notes. Target date, January 15. Method, prescribed medication interaction, accidental overdose. 3 weeks from now. They were planning to kill me in 3 weeks. I opened the other folders. Each one told the same story: wealthy widowers in British Columbia, men who'd lost their wives and were vulnerable. Evelyn had married 4 of them over the past 12 years. Each marriage lasted about 2 years. Each husband died of apparently natural causes. Dr. Morrison, a licensed physician, had signed every death certificate. The insurance fraud had netted them approximately $14 million. But it was the folder labeled Contingency, Claire Abbott, that made my blood turn to ice. Inside were guardianship papers, already drawn up. If something happened to me, custody of Claire would go to Evelyn and Dr. Morrison. There were also medical records suggesting Claire had other health issues besides her deafness, issues that would require expensive long-term care, issues that would qualify for significant insurance payouts. They weren't just planning to kill me. They had plans for my daughter too. I photographed every page with my phone. Then I carefully replaced everything exactly as I'd found it. Closed the safe, rehung the painting. I went back to my study and sat in the dark, trying to control my breathing, trying to think. At 6 in the morning, I called a number I hadn't used in 5 years. Trevor Blackwood, RCMP Serious Crimes Division. We'd worked together on a financial fraud case that had involved organized crime. He owed me a favor. "Trevor," I said when he answered, "I need to meet with you today. It's urgent, and I need you to bring someone from the insurance fraud division and someone who handles serial murder cases." "Richard?" Trevor's voice was sharp with concern. "What's going on?" "I can't explain over the phone," I said, "but I have evidence of multiple homicides and insurance fraud totaling over $14 million, and I'm the next target." We met at a coffee shop in Gastown, far from Kitsilano, far from anywhere Evelyn might see us. I brought my phone with the photographs, Claire's tablet with her logs, and a briefcase full of my own research. I'd spent the night cross-referencing the names in those folders with death records, insurance claims, and property transfers. The pattern was clear and horrifying. Trevor brought Detective Sarah Chen from Homicide and Inspector Marcus Webb from the RCMP's Federal Serious and Organized Crime Unit. I spread everything out on the table in the private room they'd reserved, and I told them everything. About Sarah's death, about Claire's deception, about the safe, about the folders. "We need to move carefully," Inspector Webb said after reviewing everything. "If they've done this successfully 4 times before, they're careful. They're experienced. One wrong move, and they'll disappear. They're planning to kill him in 3 weeks," Detective Chen said, looking at the timeline. "We don't have time to be too careful." "My daughter is living in that house with them," I said. "We have to make sure she's safe." "Your daughter has been keeping herself safe for 3 years," Trevor said, and there was admiration in his voice. "That's remarkable. She's documented conversations that will be crucial evidence. But Richard, we need to use this time. We need you to act normal. We need to gather more evidence, ideally catch them in the act." "You want to use me as bait," I said flatly. "We want to make sure when we arrest them, the charges stick," Inspector Webb said. "We need electronic surveillance, recorded conversations, documented fraud attempts. We need to build a case that's absolutely airtight. These people are smart. They've evaded detection for 12 years. We can't give their lawyers any room to maneuver." So began the most harrowing 3 weeks of my life. The RCMP installed hidden cameras and microphones throughout our home while Evelyn was at work. They tapped her phone and Dr. Morrison's. They put surveillance on both of them, and I went home every night and pretended everything was normal. Claire continued her performance as a deaf child, and now I understood the incredible strength that required. Every day she had to pretend she couldn't hear her stepmother making plans to kill her father. Every day she had to sit across the dinner table from people who'd murdered before and would murder again, and she did it without flinching. I kept working my regular cases, but I added something new. I started seeing Dr. Morrison for those routine checkups Evelyn had suggested. Each visit, he'd prescribe something new. Blood pressure medication I didn't need, sleep aids, anti-anxiety medication. The RCMP had each prescription analyzed. They were all legitimate medications, but in the combinations he was prescribing, they'd be lethal. He was building toward the accidental overdose described in the timeline. "It's brilliant, actually," the RCMP's pharmaceutical consultant told me. "Each medication alone is safe. Each prescription is justifiable, but taken together, especially if you add alcohol, they'd cause respiratory depression. You'd simply stop breathing in your sleep. The coroner would see a man in his 60s with legitimate prescriptions who'd had a few drinks and made a tragic mistake." 2 weeks into the surveillance, we got the break we needed. Evelyn called Dr. Morrison from her car, thinking she had privacy. The RCMP had bugged her vehicle. "The insurance is in place," she said. $3 million policy on Richard, $2 million on the kid. Richard's been taking everything you prescribed. We stick to the timeline. January 15th. We invite him to dinner at your place. You make those special cocktails. He takes his evening medications with alcohol. He drives home impaired. Single car accident, or he makes it home and dies in his sleep. Either way, natural causes or accidental death. The policies pay out either way. And the kid? Dr. Morrison's voice came through the speakers in the RCMP surveillance van, where I was sitting with Trevor and Inspector Webb. 6 months later, she has a seizure, Evelyn said. Tragic complication from her deafness and the trauma of losing another parent. Dr. Morrison treats her, but sadly, she doesn't survive. We collect on her policies, sell the house, and move on. I'm thinking Calgary next, or maybe we go east. Halifax has potential. You've always liked the coast, Dr. Morrison said, and they both laughed. I had to leave the van. I went outside and vomited in the alley. Trevor came out and put a hand on my shoulder. We have enough, he said. We can arrest them now. No, I said, wiping my mouth. You said we needed to catch them in the act. I want to make sure they never get the chance to do this again. To anyone. So we let it play out. January 15th arrived. Dr. Morrison called to confirm our dinner plans. I told Evelyn I was looking forward to it. She kissed me goodbye that morning, and I felt nothing but cold contempt. Claire and I had a moment alone before school. She was scared. I could see it, even though she couldn't hear me tell her it was okay. But she could read my lips when I said, "Tonight, this ends. I love you. Mom would be so proud of you." That evening, I drove to Dr. Morrison's apartment in Yaletown. The RCMP was all around us, invisible. Plainclothes officers, surveillance vehicles, tactical teams positioned at every exit. I was wired with both audio and video. So was the interior of Morrison's apartment, courtesy of a warrant executed while he was at work. Morrison answered the door with a smile and a handshake. Evelyn was already there, looking beautiful in a blue dress I'd bought her for her last birthday. The apartment was warm and inviting. Classical music played softly. Wine was already poured. "Richard," Morrison said, "I'm so glad you could make it. Evelyn's been telling me how hard you've been working. You need to relax more." "I've actually been feeling great," I said, accepting the wine glass. Best I've felt in years. I saw a flicker of something cross Evelyn's face. Annoyance? Frustration? It was gone in an instant, replaced by her practiced smile. Dinner was excellent. Morrison was a good cook. We talked about sports, about politics, about Claire's progress in school. They were charming and attentive. If I hadn't known better, I would have thought they genuinely cared about me. After dinner, Morrison brought out cocktails. "My specialty," he said. "Whiskey-based, with some herbs that are supposed to help with stress and sleep. You've seemed a bit tense lately, Richard. This should help you relax." I accepted the glass. I could see the expectation in their eyes. This was it. This was the moment. The medications I'd been taking, the alcohol, whatever was in this drink, this was supposed to be the night I died. "Before I drink this," I said, "I want to tell you both something." "Of course," Evelyn said, reaching across to touch my hand. "What is it, darling?" "I know everything," I said simply. "I know about Gerald Thornton, Thomas Westbrook, Martin Street Pierre, and Warren Chapman. I know about the insurance fraud, the fake medical claims, the murdered husbands. I know you killed my wife, Sarah, and I know you were planning to kill me tonight, and Claire in 6 months." The transformation was instant. Evelyn's face went from loving wife to something cold and reptilian. Morrison's friendly expression disappeared, replaced by calculating assessment. "You're being ridiculous," Evelyn started, but I held up my hand. "I have the contents of your safe," I said. "Every folder, every document, every piece of evidence. I have 3 years of surveillance logs from my daughter, who, by the way, can hear perfectly and has been listening to everything you've said for years. And for the past 2 weeks, the RCMP has been recording every phone call, every conversation, every prescription you've written. They heard you planning my murder. They've analyzed every medication you prescribed, and they're listening to this conversation right now." Morrison lunged for me, but the door burst open. RCMP tactical officers flooded the apartment, weapons drawn. "Police, don't move." Evelyn tried to run for the balcony, but officers were already there. They were both on the ground, handcuffed, within seconds. Inspector Webb came in, badge displayed. "Evelyn Morrison and Dr. James Morrison, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and 4 counts of first-degree murder. You have the right to remain silent." I didn't hear the rest. I walked out of that apartment, got into Trevor's car, and asked him to take me home. To Claire. She was waiting in the living room with a female RCMP officer who'd been assigned to protect her. The moment she saw me, she dropped the deaf act completely and ran to me. I caught her up in my arms and held her while she cried. "It's over," I said into her hair. "You're safe. We're both safe. You saved us, Claire. You saved us." The trial was a media sensation. The Crown prosecutors built their case on the documents from the safe, the surveillance recordings, the pharmaceutical evidence, and Claire's testimony. My daughter, who'd pretended to be deaf for 3 years, took the stand and told her story. She described hearing about her mother's murder when she was 7. She described 3 years of gathering evidence. She described the courage it took to live with killers while pretending to be disabled. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. 4 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of conspiracy to commit murder, 73 counts of insurance fraud, multiple counts of forgery and falsifying medical documents. Evelyn was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole for 25 years. She'd be 80 years old before she could even apply. Dr. Morrison got life with no possibility of parole for 30 years. Both sentences to be served in federal penitentiaries. Claire's testimony was sealed because of her age, but the judge made a point of commending her courage in his sentencing remarks. "This child," he said, "demonstrated extraordinary bravery and intelligence in circumstances that would have broken most adults. She is a credit to her father and to the memory of her mother." The families of the previous victims contacted us after the trial. Gerald Thornton's son, Thomas Westbrook's daughter, Martin Street, Pierre's brother, Warren Chapman's parents. They'd all suspected something was wrong but had never been able to prove it. Now they had answers, and they had justice. As for Sarah, my first wife, the RCMP reopened her case. They found evidence that the truck driver who'd hit her car had been paid $50,000. He'd fled to the United States after the accident and died 2 years later, but his bank records told the story. Evelyn and Morrison had murdered my wife to make me vulnerable, to set up their long con. It was premeditated murder, not an accident. That knowledge was somehow both devastating and cathartic. Claire and I stayed in Vancouver for another year while we both went through therapy. She needed help processing what she'd experienced and what she'd done. Pretending to be deaf for 3 years had psychological consequences. She'd isolated herself, cut herself off from friendships, lived in constant fear. It took time to work through that. For me, the therapy was about grief and guilt and trust. Grief for Sarah and for the life we should have had. Guilt that I'd brought danger into my daughter's life by not seeing Evelyn for what she was. And trust. Learning how to trust people again. Learning how to trust my own judgment. But we made it through. Humans are remarkably resilient, especially when they have each other. 2 years after the trial, Claire and I moved to Toronto. New city, new start. Claire is 12 now, in a regular school, thriving. She made the honor roll last term. She's on the soccer team. She has friends, real friends, who've never known her as anything but a normal kid who can hear just fine. I still work as a forensic accountant, but now I specialize in insurance fraud cases. I've helped catch 3 other Black Widow operations in the past 2 years. Apparently, Evelyn and Morrison weren't unique. There are others out there, targeting vulnerable people, destroying families for money. But I'm getting better at recognizing the patterns. I'm getting better at stopping them. Every year on the anniversary of the night of the arrests, Claire and I have a tradition. We go to Sarah's grave, and we tell her about our year, about Claire's achievements, about my work, about the life we're building, and we thank her. Because without the love Sarah gave us, without the foundation she built for our family, we wouldn't have survived what came after. People sometimes ask me how Claire did it. How does a 7-year-old child make the decision to pretend to be deaf and maintain that deception for 3 years? How does she have the presence of mind to gather evidence, to document conversations, to plan for the long term? I don't have a complete answer. Part of it was fear. Part of it was intelligence. Part of it was the strength she inherited from her mother. But mostly, I think it was love. She loved me enough to sacrifice her own childhood to protect me. She loved me enough to become someone she wasn't, to live a lie every single day, because she knew the truth would either not be believed or would put us both in immediate danger. That's the kind of love that saves lives. That's the kind of love that changes everything. If there's a lesson in all of this, it's several lessons, really. First, trust your children. They see things we don't see. They hear things we don't hear. If your child tells you something is wrong, believe them. Investigate. Pay attention. Claire tried to protect me in the only way she could, but if I'd been more observant, if I'd trusted her more, maybe we could have ended this sooner. Second, don't let grief make you vulnerable to predators. People like Evelyn and Morrison target people who are grieving, who are lonely, who are desperate for connection. They're skilled at appearing to be exactly what you need, exactly when you need it. That's not coincidence. That's predation. After loss, take time. Heal. Don't rush into new relationships just because someone seems perfect. Third, if something feels wrong, it probably is. I ignored 100 small red flags with Evelyn because I wanted to believe in the fairy tale of second chances. But my instincts were telling me something was off. I just didn't want to listen. Trust your instincts. They're usually right. And finally, resilience is real. Claire and I went through something that should have destroyed us. We lived with killers. We were targets of a murder conspiracy. We lost years of normal life to fear and deception. But we survived. More than survived. We've thrived. We've built a new life. We've found happiness again. That's not forgetting what happened. That's not pretending it didn't hurt. That's simply refusing to let evil people take anything more from us than they already have. Claire is sleeping now in her room down the hall. Tomorrow she has a soccer game. Her team is in the playoffs. She's the starting midfielder, and she's excited. That's what I focus on now. Not the past, not the what-ifs, not the nightmare we lived through. I focus on the fact that my daughter is safe, happy, and whole. She saved my life by pretending to be deaf. But really, she saved both our lives by being brave enough to see the truth, smart enough to document it, and strong enough to endure until the right moment came to reveal it. That's the story I'm telling from this hotel room, finishing up some casework before heading home to Toronto. I'm telling it because maybe someone else needs to hear it. Maybe someone else is in a situation where they sense something is wrong but can't quite put their finger on it. Maybe someone else has a child who's trying to tell them something important but doesn't know how. Listen to your children. Trust your instincts. Don't let predators use your grief against you. And remember that resilience is not just about surviving trauma. It's about building a life worth living on the other side of it. Claire and I were building that life. One day, one soccer game, one honor roll certificate, one quiet evening at home at a time. And every single day, I'm grateful that my daughter had the courage to pretend to be someone she wasn't, so that we could both become who we're meant to be. Safe, together, free.